Got one story. It's a story that I don't think you're going to hear very much. What this man does is so out of the ordinary that I just had to put this in a video by itself. Plus, I'm kind of pushed for time, but let's get on to the story. It's really good. It's from, the man's name is Mike, and he writes, I'm from a small town in Saline County, Illinois. The event takes place a few moons ago when I was 16. As a kid and a teenage boy, my friends and I spent our free time playing in the woods somewhere. Any place there was a creek to swim in, a tree or rocks to climb on, we were there. Our area was full of different legends and lore as well. Some stories were passed down through generations of the native people who walked the land before us, and some are told by our recent ancestors. I assume that some of the stories I've heard are campfire stories and just for fun. But for a teenager back then, it didn't matter. We were fearless, and the stories never detoured us. On the contrary, it made us more eager for adventure. We dreamed of solving an ancient mystery. My friends and I were a unique bunch. Not that there was anything special about us, just by how diverse our group was, and still we always managed to get along and overcome challenges amid all of our differences. For example, some believed in God while others were atheists. Some believed in ghosts and spirits while others didn't. We even went on missions looking for UFOs and aliens while others refused their existence, but they still tagged along for the ride. The area around where I live is heavily mined. One of my friends, Ricky, lived on some old mine property. We were all over the place out there hiking and riding dirt bikes. A few miles from his house was an old abandoned mine drag. A drag is an enormous piece of equipment. Imagine a 4-story building on tracks with a boom that reaches 300 feet. It was once an operating giant, and now it sat there rusting away. But all we saw was a jungle gym for big kids. The only challenge was how to get inside the giant beast. It had obviously been sealed off to keep would-be intruders such as ourselves out. But after some time, some teamwork, and lack of fear of heights and confined spaces, we got inside. The main objective was to get to the top of the boom that pulled the massive bucket. There were 5 of us, and we all wanted to make it to the end of the main boom. We spent the greater part of the day climbing and exploring the machine, and we eventually made it to the end of the boom, and at the end of the day we discovered more areas to explore. From the roof we found a way down to the engine room. It was through a steel door and into a vestibule that led to another steel door and then the engine room. We all climbed in at once and we shut the outside door behind us, but we left the inner door open. These are solid steel doors rusted by years of exposure to the weather, and they're not easy to move. We were about to head back to the exit hole, and we heard a bang across from us on the adjacent catwalk and then clanking of feet on steel as someone ran down some stairs, across another catwalk, and up the other stairs right in front of us. We heard another solid steel door slam shut. We were some tough guy teenagers at that point, but we turned pale and we took off running for our lives. We couldn't run fast enough. To get out and to get away, we had to head in the direction in which we heard this thing running. We had to squeeze through a small hatch one by one onto a 2-man platform, then down a ladder, and from there we had to descend the machine using the buddy system to get to the ground. It was not pretty or professional. 5 terrified boys were involved here, but we got it done and we escaped the mine drag safely. Sometime later, Ricky and I were talking about that day, and one of our skeptic friends, Ted, was with us. Ted said that he thought that we made the whole story up about what happened at the old mine drag. This led to some debate, and so to prove to Ted that the story was true, we agreed to take him out there. To make things scarier, we agreed to go at night with no flashlights. There was half a moon and we knew the land like the back of our hands, so it really was not a big deal. At least that is what we thought. We knew a shortcut off an old blacktop road to save us some walking time, and we pulled down an old access road, leaving about a quarter-mile walk back to the mine drag. It was a quiet walk in. None of us talked. The only sounds were our feet to the ground. And then we heard something in the bushes a few feet off the trail. And we stopped to listen. It was out of place, but the sound stopped and we kept going. The bushes began to shake again after a few paces, but this time it was harder and faster. Something was there less than 50 feet from where we stood, and we had to see what it was, so we walked straight to the spot we knew the sound was coming from. We stopped a few feet from the hedge and we looked around. Everything became quiet once again, and we were about to head back to the trail and we heard a stick snap. We turned and looked back, and a giant creature stood straight up on the other side and looked down at us. The only detail that really sticks out in my mind besides its height are its glowing red eyes and its hairy humanoid silhouette in the moonlight. As this creature rose out of the bushes, I remember it growling. It was warning us much like a dog growls, low and deep, letting us know that it meant business. I don't remember being this afraid ever in my life. I actually felt sick. All of us stood there looking up at this thing in shock. Paralyzed might be a better word. But all at once we came to our senses, and we turned and we ran back to our car. Ricky started the engine and we were about to blaze out of that place, and Ted yelled, "Stop!" Ted wanted to go back and make sure of what we had just seen. He explained in an excited tone that maybe it was our imaginations. We had been talking about ghosts and monsters for weeks, and his theory was that we saw what we wanted to see. He even said it could have been a deer. I knew that I hadn't seen a deer. It was too big, and I also knew that it could tear us apart if it wanted to. But Ted was persuasive, and believe it or not, we agreed to go back and take another look. The plan was drawn up on the spot. We would bring whatever we could find in the trunk for weapons and walk close together down the trail, and we wouldn't run back to the car no matter what. We wouldn't run because somehow in our minds we had convinced ourselves what we had seen was not real. Armed with a false sense of courage, a baseball bat, and a tire iron, we began our journey back to face our fear. Ted carried an umbrella. It was the only thing left in the trunk after Ricky and I grabbed the other weapons. We paced back down the trail, confident that we would not see this thing again. But it was waiting on us. On the trail, lit by the moonlight, still way taller and bigger than any of us, stood the same monster. Once again, we paused in amazement. No one dared run. We knew we would forever be called a chicken. There was pride involved here, so 3 teenage boys stood in front of an 8 to 9 foot tall beast in the dark like we knew what we were doing. It was a stare down for a minute. It didn't appear to be aggressive, which elevated our confidence. I took a step forward and my buddies followed me with a step of their own. The second step I made towards the creature, only 10 yards away, was a lunge. I wanted to startle it and see if it would run. Our weapons were held in front of us, ready to use. We had made the first move. Instantly, the creature lunged right back at us with a loud roar that shook my internal organs. At that point, no one cared about being called a chicken. Bravery went out the window. I'm not sure how we got out of that without wetting our britches, but we turned and ran. The thought kept running through my head, what was I thinking? That thought stays with me to this day. Gravel sprayed behind the car and we made it out of the mining area alive that night. We talked about the event for days. At that point in my life, the stories of Bigfoot, the Tuttle Bottom Monster, boogers in the woods were all imaginary, things I had heard but never dreamed were true. For years, my buddies and I messed around in those woods. We always heard strange sounds, wood knocks, whistles, and other things, and we never thought anything about it. The truth is, we were never once alone in those woods. The stories are true. These things are real and they exist in our world. I saw one and I even challenged it. My advice is to not do that, ever. It has been several years since this happened, and I now think the monster had no intention of hurting us. You would not have ever convinced me of that when it happened, but I think it wanted us out of there. It could have been on us in a split second and killed all three of us quickly, but it didn't. We finally left the area, and I will assume the creature got what it wanted. It probably had a big laugh with its buddies back at the cave. Laughing at the kids who challenged the Bigfoot. I just thought it was a great story. I don't know what else. I've never heard one where somebody actually challenged a Bigfoot. I've heard them where they take shots at them, but I've never heard one where a guy actually took a lunge at a Bigfoot. That's an awesome story. Mike, thank you for the email. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.